Sit your ass down. Sit your ass down. Let's talk about the suffering. It's time to start to pay. Sit your ass down. Sit your ass down and strap in. This is gonna hurt. This is gonna hurt. Let's talk about the suffering. It's time to start to pay. This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Thinking clearly means that we're capable of being the curators of our own information. Consider the source of everything you hear and do your research to uncover the validity. The facts are often skewed and the purpose is unclear. In the last 50 years, how much information was fed to the masses that was simply untrue or misrepresented? Egg yolks, not more than 20 to 30 years ago, were seen as artery-clogging junk food, where now they're lauded as the most complete and perfect form of nutrition. This is but one example of how misinformation gets taken on as fact. Information is a valuable commodity that can be used to sway public opinion. Those that control the source of this information have an enormous amount of power and responsibility. We must make sure we choose wisely the source of our truth. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome back our very good friend, DiAnA McElroy, to talk about the suffering of cannabis. DiAnA has done a deep dive into her industry to become a voice of reason in pretty much a chaotic industry. Thank you so much for coming back in today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I mean, it's good that someone really knows the ins and outs of it, because I couldn't tell you the first thing about it anymore.
Well,
anymore. He doesn't remember anything.
You hear so much. You don't know which side to believe. I don't know if I'm pro or anti.
You're pro. You just don't know it. You're a closeted pro.
He's closeted in other things, Di.
I was smoking out in the car before I got here.
Before we get into anything, let's thank our marquee sponsor, Toyota of Hackensack. We buy our cars from Toyota of Hackensack because we know we can trust them. We don't trust everybody in life. So if you're looking for a car, go to toyotaofhackensack.com. Let them find you a car. You also know the people of Toyota Hackensack
I was
as well.
Just about to say, oddly, I have a Toyota of Hackensack car.
Yes.
Yes.
Tell me they don't treat you the best.
Well, they kind of have to. They're also, yes.
They're very good friends.
They're very good friends. And
yes.
No, the best. Yeah.
But everybody across the board, when I went there,
yes.
They treated me like I wasn't just a number.
No.
That's one of those high anxiety things that you have to do in life.
Yes.
It's like go to the dentist, public speak, and go buy a car.
Yes.
And all salesmen just blatantly lie to your face, well, this is going to be your price. And then you go to the finance department, and they add on this and this and this and this. And
now they give you the...
Toyota Hackensack is legit. They're legit across the board.
Well, Mike and I's connection comes from Toyota.
Yep.
Years ago, before I was a cop, I sold cars.
Oh, I didn't know
I sold
that.
Toyotas.
Oh.
And I sold Toyotas.
That's why he became a cop. He wasn't too good at selling cars.
I sold Toyotas with Mike's brother.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. That's cool.
So one of the owners of Toyota Hackensack is Freddie Radelick, and he had a very good friend who Frank and Mike's brother used to work with, who has since passed away, but he was a great guy.
Yeah.
Billy was a great guy. But anyway,
before we go, she said you get your cars from Toyota Hackensack. Before we started recording, what did you say you bought a case of also?
Oh, I actually ordered this last time I was on.
It's great stuff, right?
Yeah.
You got to try I got mango. You got the black cherry?
No, I get the regular.
Okay.
I think we drank ourselves out of black cherry.
Yeah, black cherry is amazing.
Okay.
Like that's my favorite.
Okay.
So DiAnA ordered some caffeine because of us.
A lot.
You're welcome, Ron.
So we have a lot to talk about today.
Yes.
But before we get into anything, I want to get into this week's social media question, and it comes from Vinny. Vinny writes, what information that you previously thought to be true that is now proven to be false?
I will say I was going to pick on runners because I was talking to a couple of runners, and then I'm going to retract it because I do think running is hard on your body, but it is healthy. So if anyone's doing anything healthy for their body, I just am always mindful of how much wear and tear we put on our bodies.
Well, the theory behind running in the past people were just pushing the limits and
Yes.
pushing the limits,
Yes.
and they weren't scaling it back, either taking time off.
The stretching is so important.
And,
Stretching and rest.
Yes.
and
Rest is one of the biggest things for
Yes.
runners. You see these guys running every day. It's like,
Well, they came out with a book, Born to Run, and the guy ends up dying of a heart attack in his mid-50s because he was pushing the gas tank. He always subscribed to the theory that if you get the furnace hot enough, it'll burn anything. So he was putting garbage into his body.
Yep.
And he was also pushing his heart rate above the threshold into the cardio range rather than the fat range. And he actually caused aortic tears
Wow.
from the bouncing.
And for me, I think about like your hips, your knees, your ankles. You're constantly pounding on pavement. If you're not running on a soft surface, you're actually hurting your back.
well, that's all these runs, these 5K runs, 10Ks, half marathons,
Yep.
they're all on the street.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's no give on that.
No.
I don't
there
care how
isn't.
much cushion you have in your shoes. And believe me, I used to be a runner. I wound up giving it up a couple of years ago, but it was that constant pounding that killed me.
And I think it's a healthy thing because it lets people get away from their issues. It's clear.
therapy.
Yeah, it
That's
is therapy. It is a form of therapy. But I always think like, you know what? But be mindful of what that therapy is doing to your body.
Mike, what do you think?
Back in the day, both of us, we both played football as kids, and you were always given a quick water break, and they tell you, just
Salt
go
pills.
Yeah, used to give you salt tablets.
Yep.
And they used to go tell you, rinse out your mouth, don't swallow any water, because they thought water was bad for you. It was going to bloat you, and you couldn't play. And I mean,
Was that
now-
the dinosaur age? Because
just about, yeah, leather helmets and all that stuff. Yeah.
But that was the truth.
I could tell she's a friend of yours. She started in already. I mean, we're not even 5
I'm
minutes.
very
into the-
comfortable.
I prepped DiAnA. I said, break his balls
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah, but I mean, that's one thing. They told you couldn't drink water.
It's
That's
amazing, right?
crazy.
They told you just rinse your mouth out, spit it back in the fountain, and go.
Well, think about how doctors used to tell women that it's okay to smoke. Doctors,
my mother.
while pregnant, I have a visual of someone in my family, big pregnant, with an ashtray on her belly, smoking away. And there was nothing, like we didn't recoil from the image. Now, if you saw it, especially in like our civilized world, we'd be like, oh my God, we know better.
I saw
we
a
do
picture
better.
a picture popped up on Instagram the other day, and it was a guy laying in a hospital bed and two nurses holding out like cases of like cigarettes, like, oh, which one would you like? And they used to smoke in hospitals back in the day.
Airplanes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
asked my
I remember that.
grandfather this question. So my grandfather was a smoker until he hit like 50 and then just stopped.
Yep.
I said, he said, oh, I smoked when I was younger. And I said, yeah, but you guys didn't know that it was bad. And he looked at me right in the eye and he goes, we knew.
Wow.
He said that. He goes, we knew.
Well, let me tell you my smoking story because it relates back to cannabis, okay? Or back then it was weed. I went to a party with much older kids, and it was the first time I actually consumed. And we went, and we didn't know, we really weren't like the partying kids. It was me and two girlfriends. We went, and we had some alcohol, and then a joint was handed to us. None of us knew how to inhale. So we're coughing and we're like, oh my God, this hurts. We made such fools of ourselves that the very next day we went out and bought cigarettes. Okay. And we all three ended up being smokers,
Practice makes perfect.
but cigarette smokers, not weed smokers.
Right.
All three of us. I smoked for 10 years. I'm not proud to say that, but like I say to my girls now, I'm going to be 50 this year. And I'm like, see these lines? These wouldn't be here if I had followed my own,
Just stuck
internal,
to weed.
yeah. If I had stuck to my own internal, knowledge, but kids think they're gonna live forever, that nothing's gonna change about their skin, their
They know everything.
health. Oh my God.
They know
yes.
everything.
We knew everything when we were their age also,
I see. It's funny because I don't think I was ever spoken to the way I talk to my girls, like skin damage. I was like the
sun made you look healthy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I still think that a kiss of sun is okay.
Well, the vitamin, yes, the vitamin D, the vitamin K,
Yes,
it
yes.
is absolutely. You're true. It's
But laying out in the sun and,
true. The leather,
the leather.
the leather women.
The leather, yes.
You've seen them.
Yes.
You've seen them.
Listen, when I came back from 5 weeks in Japan, I was a different color because I actually, believe it or not, tan. And now when I look at like the skin damage, I'm like, oh, what did I do to myself?
2 bouts of skin cancer.
Oh, wow.
Malignant melanoma here, had another thing up here, had them both taken out.
Wow. Yeah.
For me, it's pretty simple, and it has a lot to do with diet. I mean, you could
Yep.
go with the food pyramid, which was lauded as law, and that was wrong. But I'm going to pick out one thing: is butter versus margarine. They were always told you don't have butter. Butter clogs your arteries. It's bad for you. Use margarine. Margarine is solidified vegetable oil. What they're finding now is vegetable oil is a lot of the reason. It's like radiation into your body. And think about the way the food pyramid, we get into, I mean, I could go on and on about this stuff. Obesity is at an epidemic level because of the way the food pyramid was. Now the food pyramid is upside down, where fats don't make you fat, eating cholesterol does not give you high cholesterol, and these are the new studies. But they were lauded as truth.
Yeah. Well, because who was lobbying? Probably the margarine companies who had the louder. Really, unfortunately, especially in America, it's who is leading with the dollars. You know, that's the campaign.
Who has the loudest voice and the most money?
That's nothing new. You know that's nothing new. No. So the common misconception is that Christopher Columbus raped, pillaged, and tortured the indigenous people. Do you know there's no proof of that? I know you've heard it, and I know you've heard it. There was absolutely no. There was one place where it's written, and it was his biggest adversary, who wrote a book, who wrote an article that Columbus did this. Just think about the person that likes you the least. And I'm not picking on your husband.
No.
I'm not picking on your husband.
He loves me. He's so into me. It's not 30 years, dude.
But think about that. That is lauded as truth. I was taught that as a child. And there's one piece of writing that says that. One.
So it's funny because Christopher Columbus, all these symbols of America are changing, right? The idea of who they are. He did come to a country where people already existed and said, I'm taking this, because that was the way. It really was like America. People conquer. They still do. You know, it's just unfortunately the way the world works. Look what's happening in Ukraine right now. You know, Russia is going after their resources. That's why they're attacking another country. They don't have the resources, so they're going after a vibrant country that does. Unfortunately, I don't know if mankind can ever get themselves out of that spiral.
I think it's.
You know, it's funny though. But what in history is really solid truth?
Well, history is written by the victors. All right. So just a quick note on Ukraine, just to segue into our next section, is you remember Rocky IV? Mm-hmm. Ivan Drago was a Russian, and if you watch the Creed II, he's now Ukrainian because where he lived, Ukraine broke away from Russia.
So I'll tell you, as a citizen of Poland and as a child of Soviet Poland, it's not made up stories. I'm here to witness. And tell you that at 16, when we landed, it was the first time I was allowed to go back to Poland because I had papers. I had my green card finally. The Russian soldiers were on the tarmac, just moving us along with their rifles because they owned our country. So I'm here to say not always.
Poland's had a rough history.
It's
all
terrifying.
The concentration camps were in Poland.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and Poland was hit by World War II by both sides.
Yeah.
It was Stalin on one side and, Hitler on the other side. And it was just, they came in, they took what they wanted. And Poland is a landlocked country with a lot of resources. And that's why, it's scary. Everything that's happening in Ukraine, we're
got Kabasi
neighbors.
in Poland.
Well, it's funny because you were on our show. God, I think
before. Now that we know that she's Polish, no big words and talk slow, all right? Okay, DiAnA, go ahead.
Słuchaj, ja po polsku porozmawiam, dobra?
Can we get a translator, Drew? Pull out your Polish dictionary. It's like one page. No, I'm like. That was a good one. Come on.
Wait, am I allowed to?
That was quick.
That
was quick. So you were on our show, God, I'm going to say episode 14 something. Yeah. That was a long time ago.
It was right after I got on. She was one of the first ones that I did, I think.
Yeah, your episode is now going to be 85.
Wow.
So we're moving up in the world.
Yeah.
So
I still in my head feel like I'm 27.
I don't know if we're moving up in the world or we're staying on the same thing, but we've been doing this a long time.
We've been doing this a while.
Yeah. I love the new studio, by the way.
Nice. It's nice.
I love it. Yeah.
What's the matter? You didn't like coming to my basement no more? See my dog?
Yeah, no, it was nice to see Trish and the dog, and yeah. But this is a nice setup.
I miss Mandy.
Miss him. Yeah, that's unfortunately got to look at me every week.
Yeah, no kidding.
So let's give our audience a little recap of DiAnA McElroy.
Sure.
All right. So go ahead.
So I am someone who, in 2018, I'm going to speak about myself in regards to cannabis and the industry that I work in. I looked around and decided that it was a viable industry, something that I wanted to get into. And also I realized that my smart friends, the CEO, CFO friends, were smoking cannabis again. Like they had all dropped it and they were into cigars and they were all into bourbons and whiskeys. And now I'd go to a party and everyone's passing a joint. And I'm like, huh. So I got a job with a multi-state operator. They came into my town. They opened a cultivation site. I went and introduced myself and said, hey, are you guys going to be hiring? I'm very into what you're doing.
Did you have a job at the time, or were you unemployed at the time?
I was between jobs.
Okay.
So I was looking for something to get me back into an industry.
That's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary to start a whole brand new career as an adult.
Almost on a whim, too.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? It kind of was a whim and it kind of wasn't a whim because I had been calling around and looking into like, what is the cannabis sales about? And really all I understood was the dispensary side, the retail side. Friends who were patients at the time, because it was just medical, took me to dispensaries with them. And it was just like gaining, the more information I got, the more into it I became. And they hired me virtually on the spot to be a consultant. And my role was to go to the municipalities and learn, why are people against this? And, how can we talk to them and educate?
So you were like an investigative reporter.
Kind of, yeah. In the beginning, it was kind of funny because I would go to the town hall meetings and there was one group that had formed because they were against the cultivation site. And I would just sit there and listen and take notes. And I realized most of what they were saying was just, to your point, made up stuff because they had decided in their heads they were against this location because prior to it being a cultivation site, it had been a farm for 100 years owned by a family.
And it was going to be turned, I remember this because it was going to be turned into housing. And nobody wants housing developed in their town.
No.
Nobody.
No.
So do you want a cannabis grow farm or do you want high-rise apartments?
Yep.
What do you want?
And it was, and it's funny because the site stayed the same, everything, and the neighbors quieted down. But I got into the industry and I was very fortunate because I got to work at a cultivation site and then we opened 2 dispensaries and I got to be, the face of the company and the point person between the municipalities. So I was allowed to garner a lot of experience within the industry. And now that we're adult use, I'm still one of the first original in New Jersey.
Well, that's what's really changed since the last time we sat down.
Cannabis pioneer.
Yes.
Yes.
Look
yes.
at you.
Like
I know.
the
I am.
Lewis-
We're among royalty
The
today.
Lewis and Clark of cannabis.
The Princess Diana of weed. Yeah.
No, she wasn't No, that's not a good analogy. That's-
It's Lewis and Clarksky.
Thanks.
But that's what's
I'm
changed.
giving you your just due. Go ahead.
That's what's changed from the
Yes.
last time we sat down is now it has been approved
Yep.
for adult use.
Yep.
And I had some hesitation the last time we spoke. And my hesitation for voting against it was, my opinions, I don't care either way. Like, I'm not worried about the danger of it. I was more worried about where the money was going and who was going to take over the industry. The politicians, without getting into a political debate, the politicians were pushing very hard for it, which scared me more than anything.
When the politicians are pushing hard for it,
There's something in it for them.
they got an inside track on something.
I will say in this one instance, the politicians were pushing hard for it because their contingencies were pushing hard for it. So the people voting them in, it got voted in 67%. Most of New Jerseyanites were like, listen, if I want to smoke cannabis, I want to smoke cannabis. Or if I want to, partake in an edible, I want to be allowed to take. Or it started really with the wave of patients who were coming out and saying, this really changed my life. Like, this really has changed my grandmother's life. And the voices started getting louder and louder and louder. And the politicians started tuning in.
Well, they proved that medicinal use was helping a lot of people.
Well, that's
And
like
can I tell you-
Whether it be PTSD or any kind of
and this
injury.
is the way I always say, it is whether you're using it recreationally or adult use, it's still a plant-based medicine. So you're going to get benefits from it. So you're going to get the anti-inflammatory benefits from it. You're going to get the, and depending on your THC level, like you might get a heady high or you might not. Like there's so many variables with this plant.
Well, that's like our one of our sponsors is Xbody. So go to xbodyus.com, right here in Wayne. And but that's about overall health and wellness to your body, and they can do several different medical tests on you to find out what's going on, and it might lead to your industry. But getting back to the political version of
and it should, because it is health and body. I mean, that's one of the reasons I found passion in it.
I agree with you on a lot of these things, but the political side of it, I just noticed that Pfizer got involved.
Yeah.
All right, and that bothers me, because when politicians don't do anything without ulterior motives, they just don't.
Yep.
And once Pfizer got involved, my senses went up, and I'm like, oh.
Listen, all the big lobbies are going to come after it, because it's an industry that is going to make money, is making money, and it's a new, they're hiring, they're building, it involves so much monetary gain within a state that it enters.
But the politicians are going to make money also.
That's what bothers me.
That's what bothers me the most about it. These politicians, they're driving bigger cars now.
Where you're like a mom and pop. Okay, I consider you a small.
And I'm also not plant touching. So that's like, I'm within the cannabis space, but I'm also not someone who
cultivates,
sells. Like I'm completely not plant touching.
So you're not a drug dealer.
I'm not a drug dealer. No.
But what I'm saying
on the
is,
surface, she's not. Maybe.
You have Home Depot, which took away all the home, the family-owned hardware
stores. Yep.
And I see this because there's money there.
Yep.
And I see Pfizer coming in and trying to do the same thing with the mom and pop cannabis stores.
Oh, 100%.
And that doesn't sit right with me.
100%. But here's the problem: are you into capitalism? Because if you are, then that's just the natural progression. And it's sad to say that, because I don't agree with it, to your point, but it's just how the world works. And if you have something viable, then people are going to come after it. Cannabis, or hemp even, was viable years ago, but it was threatening someone's bottom line.
William Randolph Hearst.
So they went after it.
Yep.
They went after it.
The Marijuana Tax Act of 1938 was written on his behest.
You were there when they wrote that, weren't you?
I was. I think
he signed it.
I actually signed it. But the
right,
funny thing,
under John Hancock.
I've read the Marijuana Tax Act of 1938 in preparation for your first show, and it is laced with incredibly racist points of view.
We got into that on the last episode. Which
and that's something that has to be spoken about, because New Jersey is basing a lot of their application process on social equity. Why? Because this was a plant. Imagine you're Italian, right? No.
God, bite your tongue.
He's Italian. Okay,
bite
you're
your
Italian.
tongue.
Imagine you can't grow a tomato, but it's part of. Oh, that's funny. So speaking in my ear. So you're being told that you can't grow a tomato, and that tomatoes are outlawed. But more than prior to that, you were told you have to grow tomatoes. Tomatoes are going to sustain this entire country. They're good, they're a good source of vitamin C, vitamin blah, blah, blah. That's what happened with hemp. Hemp was actually on its road to being
replacing paper.
Replacing paper. Right when the legalization prohibition happened, they actually had a prototype car made completely out of hemp.
And then the movie Reefer Madness was made. And
could you imagine?
But you know what growing tomatoes? You know what growing tomatoes does to Italians?
What?
Makes you grow chest hair, and you sprout gold neck chains.
Doesn't make you lose.
Hold on.
Doesn't make you lose your head hair.
Hold on. You know who I'm talking about.
Take
it easy. Take it easy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But that's what a tomato does. That's what a tomato does.
Yeah, but without weed back in the day, where would Cheech and Chong be?
It wouldn't be as funny. But they took that acid. They took a lot of acid too. So that was a different thing. But so the industry is changing.
Yes.
And it's growing. And I like the small business owner. I do. And I'm always a champion of the small business owner. Big corporate people come in because a small business owner, they're going to have employees. They might not have as many employees, but they're going to treat their employees like family.
And most of them, so that's why New Jersey is trying to get the legacy growers and the people in the legacy market to come into it legally. Because
what is a legacy grower?
So it used to be called the black market. It's the guys that were selling prior to being legalized. Now in New Jersey, New York, a lot of the states are saying, we want to find an entry point for you guys to come in. So you're no longer...
The guys that were illegally growing it back in the day.
Yes.
The guys who know how to grow it. And
illegally growing, illegally selling, distributing. Those are the guys that we're trying to pull into the legal market.
So they're the heroes now, and they're the guys that we used to lock up back in the day during our career.
How sad is that?
Yeah, it's
and
crazy.
now, and because someone arbitrarily decided that this plant, think about that, okay? This plant is illegal. That's the crazy part to me is, do I see certain issues with the plant? Yes. You were going to touch upon driving while,
That's my sticking point.
I know. And that's a lot of people.
Listen, with alcohol, you got what they used to have the breathalyzer. Now they have an alcohol test. They could tell spot on at that point how much alcohol you have in your system. There's no way of checking for that with cannabis.
And it's being, it is something that people bring up all the time because there is a fear that someone who is altered or impaired is going to hurt someone. But studies have shown that in states where it's been legalized, there hasn't been a rise and I have a theory behind it. I think because
there's a rise in accidents, because I spoke with a cop out from Denver. See, there's a rise in accidents, but they're like 20-mile-an-hour accidents.
But now
because people are paranoid, and when you're driving impaired, you're a lot more conscious that, we're drunks. Think about alcohol, how alcohol makes you act physically versus cannabis, right? Cannabis, you're kind of zoned in. Alcohol, you're a little bit more,
But hitting that kid running out in the street, it doesn't matter 20 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour.
What's your response time? What's your reflexes at that point? But getting back to that driving, I got a funny story for you.
Your friend who was driving.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You told me this one. This is a great story.
We had a friend of ours that he took an edible one day, and he was driving to his friend's house, and he's going on Route 80, and he's sitting there, and the edible just started kicking in, as he's driving. He said, I could feel it from my head down. It just started and I'm slumping. He said, I pull over to the slow lane. He said, I'm driving. He said, all these cars are just flying past me. And I'm sitting there, and the guy's sitting there going, where are the troopers? These guys are they're doing 100 miles an hour. He looked down and he was doing 45.
Yeah.
But so the problem with operation, and I know this from the police here, so they have to get what's called a DRE, a drug recognizance expert, to come in.
Drug recognizance, drug recognition.
Whatever you want.
Yeah.
DRE.
One of those. Yeah,
Which
DRE.
right now is being, it's held up in court.
Right. DREs, a lot of judges don't, that's the point I was getting to. A lot of judges don't recognize DREs. So somebody who's
a DRE can't do anything because you got to go on the alcohol test first. If you have if you come up 0.01 for alcohol, you can't go to the DRE because you have alcohol in your system, alcohol in your system. So now a DRE is null and void at that point.
So they got to come up with a better system to test for driving while impaired, because we have children, and that's my concern. We have children that are soon going to be driving age before we know it.
Yep.
And that's a concern of mine. And I don't want to see them. I know there's prototypes out there that they can test if you've been high in the past couple hours, but there needs to be case law. And we spoke about this in the first episode where they sort of put the cart before the horse. But you had said something, I remember this, where they have to put it in play and then figure it out.
Unfortunately, yes. And so right now they're going through it in workplaces, right? Because cannabis is legal. And if it's your medication, if you decide to go on your lunch break and have a couple of shots, and you're not impaired, but you had a couple of shots, should you be fired?
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
Yes.
But for some people, and I'm going to rebut because it's not the way I roll, but for some people, their job is to go and have lunch with someone. Oh, you're ordering wine? I'll order wine with you because
business meetings.
Business meetings, right? That's how they're conducted. That's how so now your business is cannabis, right? And you smoke with someone. When you go back to your work, can you still do your job safely? Well, most places and most things, yes, unless you're driving a pitchfork, unless you're.
It's not an argument that I'm not being adversarial to you, but
No,
if
no.
I'm a swimming pool salesman and I'm selling a swimming pool to somebody, I don't have to take a swim in their backyard in order to sell them the swimming pool. There is a certain business decorum, and if cannabis is the business that I think it is,
Yep.
a business meeting should be a business meeting. It shouldn't be, I'm going to, even with the alcohol, it's the same thing. A business meeting should be a business meeting.
But that's how you conduct your life, and that's not how a lot of people conduct their lives.
And the alcohol salesman may go to a place and say, here, try our tequila as opposed to this tequila.
100% samples.
Little samples.
They send the cute girls with the skimpy outfits and like, here you go, try our,
I've never seen them before.
Oh, yeah. It's the same. I mean, think about all the sales reps for pharmaceuticals. They were all hot babes that got their way into a doctor's office.
Yeah, but they're not doing the pharmaceuticals that they're pushing. You follow me? So if you, somebody who's truly in the wine industry, take the wine industry, somebody who is a wine taster, that's all they do. They never swallow the wine, ever. Because in my mind, business is business, pleasure is pleasure. If you want to, after hours, get together with them and sample product, do whatever, that's a different story. But business, it doesn't allow for a clear head.
See, and it's funny because now that I microdose, I'm going to disagree with you because it actually allows for a deeper conversation and it allows for.
Well, we've run into this before with somebody else, where they were they were macro dosing, but they became incoherent. They really did, and they thought they were being coherent. Yep. Like when you're drunk, you think you're making tons of sense, but if you ever played a recording of it, you're like, oh my gosh.
But are you talking about someone we had here?
Yes,
or not here, but
yes.
Yes. Hysterical.
But it was very funny. But again, it's just one of those things where I may not agree with you on it. I take everything you say, and I know I'm a realist. I do know certain business meetings they take place over liquor. I do know that.
Yeah. And
I mean, even like they say, most business deals are made on a golf course.
100%.
Right? So what do? They go out, they play golf, and they drink, and the deal is settled. You may not be working at that point, but you're still a representative of your company, and you're having alcohol.
100%. And that's why a lot of women aren't involved in a lot of business deals because they don't get invited to those golf outings. Sorry, I had to throw that dig in there because you're not
because
wrong.
women golfers are awful. No.
Well, a friend of mine once said I got a nice set of golf clubs for my wife, and I said, hey, good trade. I'm sorry. It was a joke. I'm kidding. I don't want to piss off the women.
Well, I think that's a good trade. But so again, that's my idea of business. And when I go into a business meeting, I always like having a clear head. We've had not issues, but we've had invitations to have, number one, I don't drink, but to drink during one of these shows, I can't do it because I need to remain sharp.
Yeah. So, did I consume before I walked in here? No, because I have to drive my car home. Mm-hmm. So
that's called responsibility.
It is. I actually will tell you a funny story. I'm going to out myself. I sometimes will microdose during the day because that's my time, I use it as a form of physical therapy. I use it as a form of cognitive, it tickles your brain. It helps with creativity. It really, for me, it works that way. And one day I have everything done. I am golden. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to smoke a little bit. And I do. And my kid calls from school.
So you don't do
Mom, you got to come pick me up.
Yes.
You don't do the edible.
I don't do the edible because I like flower. I know the onset of flower.
Flower is
smoking the traditional plant, the plant itself. And the onset is 10, 15 minutes. I know how long it's going to last. I know how it feels.
We had a friend of ours that had a really bad experience with edibles.
I was just going to say that. We have a mutual friend who...
Yes, we had a friend.
We're waiting for the edibles.
Why don't you tell that story?
But I'll tell you my story. So I had to go and knock on someone's door and say, this is what I did, and I need you to drive to pick up my kid.
So
why did I do that? Because I am trying to live my life according to my responsibility,
Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's the Wild West.
For some people it does. For other people like myself, I try to stay within a lane,
That's one of my concerns too, is these people, like you said, the Wild West, they're going to say, oh, it's legal, it's overindulged, like people do with alcohol now.
And here's
alcohol is legal, so they go out, they get drunk, they get in their car and they drive. Now that cannabis is legal, what's to stop them from smoking all day, overindulging, getting in their car and going
here's
somewhere.
the scary part. The edibles are what jack most people, because when you take flour, for example, you feel it instantly. When you take a concentrate, when you take an edible, you don't know. Your friend the story you just told, you don't know how long before the onset. I had a friend of mine who decided he was going to try it. He didn't listen to the advice of the wellness associate, jackass, tripled the dosage because it wasn't coming on fast enough, strong enough. And I get a call. From his panicky wife who's like, oh my God,
I think
what's
he's
happening?
dying.
I get a call from him going, dude. And I'm like, I thought you would know better. And all I did was, and this is the beauty of cannabis versus alcohol. With alcohol, once a person is so drunk, you can't, I was a bartender, you can't pull them back. Like you just can't. With cannabis, they go to a certain point and then you see it. You literally see the high coming down. I put this gentleman in a chair. I got him comfortable, and I literally had my hand on his shoulder going, you're just an asshole. You're just an asshole.
So I know a little
So you
bit-
put him in a timeout.
I did.
There
And
you go.
know what? The next
you're in
day,
a timeout.
he called and thanked me, and I said, what did you learn? He said, I learned I'm an asshole. That's right. Because when someone tells you to only take this much, listen to them, because they have your best interest. And that's where, education is the number one tool that I can offer the world. Is how long will gummies? I just did a social experiment with a group where they've all tried gummies, and they were like, oh my God, I was jacked for hours, and oh my God. Well, now you've had a negative experience with cannabis.
Do you have any placebo gummies?
So, yeah, I should try that actually on people. So instead, I brought flour. They had immediate reaction, immediate feeling, and they were like, oh.
Well,
and I'm like, yes.
this one person you're talking about, I have some extra information on that one because I did speak to them, and so they're again a jackass. So they thought, they didn't know that edibles take a period of time to hit, so they just kept taking and taking and taking, and
So that's the issue.
and then when it hit, it's like, whoa.
And that's an issue that, like, more information needs to be given out to the public on how long, and this is one of my roles used to be, and I still do it, is the education portion. How long will an edible take? Because to your point, you take it and 45 minutes later, nothing. So you take another one, and just as you're taking the second dose, which you can't undo, bam, it hits you, and now you're jacked.
Isn't that specific to each person, though?
Yes, and that's the problem.
It's like
too.
having a beer. Somebody may get drunk off of 2 beers. Someone may get drunk off of 5 beers.
But unless you've done it before, and most people, and it, not only can it be per person, but what did you eat that day? Because it's going through your digestive tract. So what did you eat that day? How fast is it going to hit you? Have you had any food? That also has to do with it. Do you understand what you're taking and the dosage, behind it? People need to ask more questions instead of, because it's so new that I think everyone's running out, and edibles just sounds easier because they don't have to worry about the smell, and their neighbors won't know. But then once you're committed for hours, hours.
So this new law that's come in there, this new cannabis law, from somebody who's inside the industry, what are some of the sufferings of the business owners who are in there? Like there's got to be, it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Oh no. So I'll tell you, to your point, the big companies are coming in. They have the capital, they have the resources, they understand how to build the infrastructure, because they, something goes wrong, they have more money to pull on. Small time people think it's a gold rush. They really do. They hear cannabis, they think like, oh my God, I'm going to mortgage my house, I'm going to open a cultivation site, I'm going to sell weed. And I'm like, whoa. Have you ever sold weed before? That's why we're trying to pull in the legacy market, because they actually understand the product.
Well, that's what Kevin said, though. It's really taken away from the mom and pop market already.
In a lot of cases it has, and we're trying to, in New Jersey, we're trying to make sure that those people have an entry point. We're trying to make sure that they have,
Are you going to be stuck working in a factory in one of these larger grow houses just because you want to get involved in the the weed industry.
And you might, and some people love that. I mean, some people love going in, doing the same thing every day, and it soothes their soul, and they know what's expected of them, and that's okay. You know, people worked factories years ago and didn't mind. It's for people who want to self-develop, like, you know, how can they learn within the industry? How can they develop themselves? I'll tell you, I just finished sending off to a college a curriculum on cannabis, because there's so many ancillary opportunities, meaning like you do packaging, you know, someone printed this up for you. Like, this is needed in cannabis. You know, someone made your T-shirt. That's needed in cannabis. Like, there's so many ancillary ways to get involved as well.
There's a lot of marijuana T-shirts out there that I see.
Yeah, but, you know, like...
Yeah, and where's our higher high T-shirts?
Oh, I know. I have to actually make more. It's one of the things to your point of like a small business owner, is not having the resources or capital to be like, here's my marketing team. They're gonna get this on the line for me. Everything is me, myself, and I.
You know, I kind of like the legacy idea, because I'm sure in law enforcement,
it gets drug dealers off the streets. It
gets them off the street. It gives them a viable job.
Correct.
Yep.
But now they got to pay taxes.
In your career in law enforcement, have you ever gone into like a weed grow house?
No.
I mean, these guys they're meticulous in what they do. With the lights, and they know when, and they got sprinkler systems on them. I mean, these guys are good.
They are. And you know, that's a skill set.
Yeah.
That's a skill set. And instead of punishing, because that was for years, now you take them and you say, you know what? We want you to teach the next generation and potentially grow some generational wealth instead of incarceration, generational wealth, you know? We're trying to break the system that kept a people down. To your point, it was looked at as a very easy way to keep Black, brown people down. It was. Because if you white dudes were worried about the alcohol. They had their alcohol. It was the Black, brown people. It was part of their culture. It was part of, you know, medicinally they used it.
Well,
culturally
that filtered down. We had a gentleman in here. His name's Seth Ferranti. He wrote and produced the documentary for Netflix called White Boy about Rick Wersch, who was the drug kingpin of Detroit. Now, Seth was the LSD kingpin of the country. He sold a lot of LSD, but he was also a big weed seller. But he was trying to make money to buy the weed, because in order to get the good stuff, it was only grown or harvested in the fall. It was a whole thing to it. So he was caught with no drugs. There was a lot of LSD out there, and it was all his, and he admits it. He got a 25-year sentence. He did 21 years of it as a first-time nonviolent offender. Now, conversely to that, there's a guy who shot at me, tried to kill me with a gun. It was a legally owned gun, but I think they were in the process of trying to take it away from him. He got 6 years. He did 4. So Seth did 21 years for not getting caught with one drug as a first-time nonviolent offender. A guy who tries to kill a cop gets 6 years, does 4.
So if I shoot at you, I could be out in 4 years?
Yeah, go ahead. Give it a shot, man.
Might be
say
worth
I
it.
didn't see anything.
Exactly.
Diana's going to come in and be my co-host. So, you know, that system is broken. But it did change. So what Seth had told us is the inner cities, they were cracking down on minorities, and the judicial system said, well, this is a little racist. So then they started going after the white guys. And the white guys got incredibly, so it kind of evened itself out a little bit. The white guys got incredibly heavy sentences. Heavy. They did pay the price for what you're talking about. And it did happen to some extent. So the industry is changing a little bit. Is there any downsides that you have seen so far to the legalization?
Not yet. I think, you know, we're coming out of a stigmatized market. So there's, you know, conversations that are starting to be had. I think if you're in the industry like I am and have been for years, then sometimes people like just assume that like, she's a stoner. No, you know.
I was going to say, do you get those looks like from around town? Like, oh, that's the weed girl.
Dude, like not even funny, but like when I first, because I announce to the world everything because I'm just like an asshole that way. And so when I get passionate about stuff and I want to like share the information that I'm learning. So when I first announced, yes, there was a lot of judging, and I can't make brownies and bring them to any social event without people just like,
DiAnA, give me your brownies. Give me your brownies.
yes,
DiAnA, you do the signs. You write up the signs of how much it costs.
Do you want me to
We'll
bring
take care of the
food? No,
bacon.
thanks.
yeah. But and it was funny because I either got such utter disappointment, like where I was like, dude, I'm sorry, they're just brownies, or the like, she brought brownies. And I'm like, they're just brownies. Like,
And
they
you see
really,
the one guy in the corner scoffing down the brownies. But there is one con that actually this is a pro to the legalization. This is a pro. So our good friend Charlie Cifarelli, you see his book there, 14th and 2nd. He just published that. His he has a friend that was sold some illegal weed on the street that was laced.
Yep.
And put them in the hospital.
Yep.
So the pro of the legalization is that's gone. But is it cutting out you could probably buy, I don't even know what weed goes for on the street anymore. Illegal weed is always going to be much cheaper than legal weed. Is it cutting out the poorer sections? Like, hey, weed is no longer it's not for poor people anymore. It's only for rich people.
You're definitely going to have that. You're definitely going to have where certain people, and this is one of the things that, like in California, for example, they started taxing it. They were, to your point, like the politicians were like, yeah, we could make money on this. People are like coming in droves. Tourism picked up because people from other states were coming in. They started jacking up the taxes where the people who wanted to buy from a dispensary could no longer afford it, and especially if you take a patient who like now relies on their medicine. So they went back to the legacy market.
I was going to say, I don't think you'll ever get rid of the street dealer.
The legacy market, meaning the illegal drug.
The illegal drug. Yes. And again, it was called the black market, but because we're trying to undo the social equity portion, it's been renamed the legacy market. The
drug dealers even get their own, they're protected class.
But okay, so we just had this conversation. You're calling them drug dealers, and yes, they dealt in drugs, but it's what they knew. It's what they're good at. It's now a skill set that's looked for. And they were, they took the risk. They took the risk to keep this plant going. And now it's like, okay, let's not call them the black market anymore because there is a negative connotation. Like I see both sides to it, and let's call it legacy. Let's call it like this way. Maybe we could invite them into the table, and have a legit business.
But I mean, you could pick their brain and figure out how to do it, but they were drug dealers. Call it what you want. Call it black market. Call it pink market. They were drug dealers.
Yes,
they were doing something illegal.
You're not wrong. Technically, they were, but why was the plant prohibition against in the first place?
Well,
it's a complicated story because
they're not selling just weed for most of them, not all of them. Most of them were selling whatever they could get their hands on, and they're cutting the hell out of it. They're getting the Mexican brick stuff.
No, I have to disagree with you because there's a lot that are just they're so passionate about the flower and the plant that's all they're selling is because they take great pride in having the best product out there. They take pride in, so it's not, you can't broad brush everyone that way because there are people in the legacy market who are trusted within their community because you know what? They've never sold anything laced. So their community, this is why we want them in the legit market. Their community already trusts them.
What about Johnny, who used to sell lids on the street corner, it was garbage weed? Is he somebody that they're looking for?
No.
Or he's a bottom tier. He's
like with anything else, it's like your product speaks for itself, right? Like, so you're going to be weeded out if you don't bring quality product. And some people
they're going to weed out the good ones.
But of a percentage, how many legacy dealers?
Yep.
How many of them do you think would be worthy to get a top position in the new market?
and willing? Because now they're not going to make the same money going legit as they did.
Government's going to take 30-some%.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, some of them are willing to take that because they realize that they don't want to fall under that umbrella anymore. And now this product that they're so passionate about, they have the opportunity to sell legitimately, and they're going after licenses, and they're actually being put ahead on the line. Like in New Jersey, if you went to prison in New York, if you went to prison for cannabis, you're actually like deemed more worthy because it's crazy that prohibition ever happened against cannabis. It's like if you look at the history of why it was, criminalized, it's insanity.
I mean, like Kevin talked about that on our first episode. I mean, that 1938, that was a total, absolute racist farce.
Correct.
Yes.
The reason they illegalized it. But regardless of why it was illegalized, it was illegal.
I get it.
It was illegal.
I get it. You're a cop and or an ex-cop, and I totally understand that because
I want to run down the street with naked. Okay, but that is frowned.
Give me a warning
first. We're going to ask you not to.
That is frowned upon in current society. As a matter of fact, it's illegal because you're exposing yourself to minors and stuff like that.
Now, in 25 years from now, if they say it's okay to go outside naked,
I'm a legacy streaker.
But listen, now you take that same streaking and you take it to the south of France, where naked beaches, and it's just a naked body.
And hairy women.
It's just a naked body. That's all. Like, in your head.
But it's illegal. My point, where I was going with that is, I don't do it because it's illegal. And there's a lot of stuff I don't do because it's illegal. Not because I think it's harmful, not because I think it's bad, because it's illegal.
And listen, I'm not advocating streaking, but like, think about you're born naked, right? And then one day,
I was fully clothed.
Yeah,
when I was born.
Somewhere along civilization, they decided, you know what? You got to cover that junk up. You got to cover this up. You got to cover up that. Why do you have nipples and your nipples can show, my nipples can't show? Like, you ever think about that? Like,
I have nipples. Can you milk me?
Apparently, you just don't try hard enough.
Okay.
Yeah, right. That's a new.
Oh boy.
So, Mike, we're going to work on that.
Here we go. Here comes another theory.
We're going to work on that.
You know what? I want to test it. So that is apparently.
Can we turn off the cameras for a minute, Drew?
Not here and now, but could you imagine this is like humanity if men could aid in that? Let me tell you, as someone who breastfed, I accused Bob of refusing to help. I accused him irrationally.
I am all for breaking that stigma. Hey, you want to go to the beach and just a bottom? Go do your thing.
But you just said it. Why just a bottom? Like for some people, bottoms are optional too. Again, I'm not.
Hey, if you want your cuckoo hanging out, I'm good.
Go to Sandy Hook.
Is that?
They got a nude beach down there.
It's not the south of France.
So,
did you ever go down to Sandy Hook?
I did as a teenager, and the guard actually warned us. My girlfriend and I went, and we were like, "Oh, let's go see." And he stopped us, and he goes, "Girls, it's not the south of France, and it's not."
Well, they have volleyball nets set up, and there's people playing volleyball who should not be naked. It is.
So you play volleyball down there?
Well, listen, I'm half Irish. Nothing flapped when I was jumping up to get the ball. But it's something you should see.
The one thing I do know about nude beaches is most people who go to nude beaches should not go to nude beaches. You follow me?
Yeah.
It's not something you want to see. But your new company,
yes,
Higher High.
Yes,
I want to get into that because you're an advocate. And you're a brand manager, and I read the profile, and I know you. Let's know each other. How are you advocating? How are you advocating for the cannabis industry?
So one of my biggest things, first off, I want to give myself little props because I love the name that I chose because my stoner friends think it has to do with weed and getting high, so they're all for it. They're like, yeah, higher high. It actually is a financial term, which means you get a higher return on your investment. So,
Google it and you'll see. I'm serious. Google Higher High and it's all financial stuff.
It is all
that's exactly
financial.
what I did.
Yeah,
I was looking for
That's why the arrow, the financial.
The arrow is like,
the stock market arrow.
Market arrow.
Exactly. So I like to say that when you hire me, you get a higher return on your investment. Just because I was raised to be a hard worker and if I use your bathroom, I'm going to clean it on my way out just because it's instilled in me, leave a place nicer than you found it. So I started my firm a year ago this summer. And
you are the CEO?
I am the CEO and founder. And it's really funny because I'm first generation here in America. I'm the first one in my family to go to college. I'm the first for so many things. And I've had to rework my brain to not be an employee, to be an entrepreneur. And it's a real hard shift because when you're an employee, your mindset is one way. When you're your own boss, you realize that like you have to bring opportunity, and any opportunity is within your reach if you work hard enough.
But being an employee, being a boss,
It's exhausting.
having been a prior employee, you could see where
The holes are.
Oh, yeah,
where the holes are.
100%.
But you are the reason, DiAnA McElroy, you are the reason why, for all of our faults in America, America is the greatest country in the world. And I am a
Thank you.
firm believer in that. And you prove that point. You are first generation American. All right. You are a female owned business. You took the bull by the horns and you started this scary venture.
You're going to make me cry.
It's the truth. And that is,
No, listen, I'll bring it right back to him. Don't you worry about it. I'm gearing up.
So convinced, especially now, I've always been convinced, this is why America is the greatest country in the world, because you took that opportunity, you seized it. And I know you're doing great things because I do follow you.
Yep.
I follow all the stuff that you do.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to bring education. I'm trying to bring enlightenment. I'm trying to bring opportunity. I'm trying to bring people to the conversation that like normally wouldn't talk about cannabis. You know, that's my mission within Higher High, is just there's opportunities to be had. Let's have an honest conversation on the opportunities, because to my point before, you know, people hear green rush and they think they're going to be growing money off of trees. No, it's hard. Like you have to figure out your angle within this industry, you know? And once again, I feel like Black and brown people are taken advantage of because they're like, oh, weed. No. Do not mortgage your house. Do not think, you know, it takes $2 million to open a dispensary. Like, do you really have that capital? Do you really have, what are you already doing? Pivot what you're doing already.
you use Gold Rush as a term.
Yeah.
So in the 1849 Gold Rush out in San Francisco, do you know at Sutter's Farm? What?
Yeah.
Do you know who made the most money during that Gold Rush?
Probably the people selling lumber.
People selling dry goods.
Oh, yeah.
Dry goods, pans, shovels, and food.
Yeah. Did you ever watch Deadwood?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was the people sustaining the town of people going out to explore for the gold. Yes,
Absolutely.
110%.
There was one guy, and I can't remember his name. His name escapes me, but the one guy, he found, or he heard that gold was, and he got it out in the newspapers. And before he let it out, he bought all the supplies and opened up his own general store. He made the most money. So opportunity in the cannabis business is not necessarily selling the plant, the flower, or the product.
Do you know who made the most money right off the bat? Real estate agents.
For shops?
For everything. Yeah. For everything. They understand if you're a real estate agent or were, because now it's like the opportunities are shrinking, though there still are a lot of municipalities that have opted out, a lot of municipalities. If you understand where a good location is for a cultivation site or a dispensary, and you have the capital behind you, you are buying up those spots and you're holding on to them because the value is just going to, you know, I heard a quote that most
was it the producers of podcasts make more money than the podcasters?
Do they?
Yeah, no kidding. Andrew drives a bigger car than I do.
It's,
I know that.
It's the service industry.
It is.
It is.
It is. It's, you know, it's like if I had known, if I could rewind, if I had known, you know, 20 years ago that cannabis and I had a crystal ball, I would have bought up certain buildings because now I understand which buildings work best.
You had to go through the suffering of the entry level into the cannabis business to learn what you know now. And now you're in a position to pass that information on to others.
Not only that, but I also tutor them in don't let anyone tell you just because you don't have cannabis experience. In most, like I didn't have cannabis experience. So I was told that like your value is very low because you don't have cannabis experience. I built an entire department in New Jersey and the industry watched me build it, but yet I had no cannabis experience because I'm not stupid. I learned what I needed to learn. You know, like I took information. I stayed up at night. I read every article that I could, and I still consume every article I can just to understand. If I see that there's a podcast or a webinar on cannabis, I'm on it because there might be one word that I didn't have in my repertoire, you know?
But I mean, that could go for almost any business. Like Kevin was talking, he was in car sales before, you know.
And sucked at it, apparently.
I was actually quite good at it.
That's why he's not here. That's why he's not doing it anymore. No, but you got to learn all about those cars in order to sell them.
Yes.
And all about
if you're good at it, if you're really passionate and good at and going to be good at it.
and all about the other brands of cars that are similar to that. So you
For
could
comparison.
refute anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that they were the
Comparison
successful ones. And car sales, much like the cannabis industry, you're going to get some people in there and they're going to try to wing it.
Yep.
And they're going to fail.
Yeah.
Or you can be a true professional like you are. You can be a true professional, consume all of that information and become educated. Somebody once told me, and this was one of my favorite quotes, is if you're not reading about your industry every single day, then you're not a true professional.
100%, because then, or you're not passionate about it. Like you have no passion, you know? That's where I think I came in and I fully own this. I came in seeing a potential for a new industry. And then I became passionate. The more I learned about it, the more I was like, wow, it's really helping people. Like, wow, you know, that child that suffers from cancer, like it's actually a medication that's working. So I became like an advocate on my own through, you know, my own, I exposed myself to it. And then the world brought me like evidence, you know, information, and I try to project that back out to the world.
So one word I want to bring up, and this can't be a long discussion, but I just need to hear
Okay.
gateway. Because everybody says it. Marijuana is the gateway
So for me,
drug.
I just said it. It was the gateway to smoking cigarettes.
No, but is it a gateway to, you know, stronger drugs? Whether
If I get high from this, can I get higher from something else?
And that's where I 100%, it's actually used to get people off of opioids. It's actually used to get people off of addiction of like much stronger drugs because it takes the edge off and it just allows your body. Listen, cannabis is a natural plant. In its natural form, it is a plant. We have every mammal has an endocannabinoid system, which was just discovered like 20 years ago. And
Cannabinoids, that doesn't sound like that sounds dirty.
That's a Polish word she just made up.
I kicked him right in the cannabinoids.
And that's what cannabis has, cannabinoids. And so it's like a lock and key mechanism where if you smoke cannabis, it just unlocks. That's why I personally have benefited so much from it. You know, like physically, if I can't even tell you, you know, I'm turning 50 this year. Things are just a little bit like, ow, creakier.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. Well,
56 now. So.
But I could drop it like I'm 20 because of cannabis. And I mean that, like, because of cannabis, like I am able to maintain a healthier lifestyle, you know, weight loss. Cannabis, there's a studies coming out that cannabis can help with weight loss.
So then the munchies is a different. I mean,
that's a different strain.
That's
a different strain.
And it is a dosing journey. Like I will not lie. There are some strains that I do find myself a little bit more peckish, but I'm also very disciplined. So I will set myself up for success in the house and be like, you know what? I'm not going to keep the ooey gooey cake that Paula Deen.
Just get the Doritos out.
Oh, see,
that's where you make the money in the cannabis industry is selling Doritos. DiAnA, where can
stock in Doritos or Lay's?
Where can we find you?
You could find me on LinkedIn under the DiAnA McElroy. LinkedIn, by the way, for anyone looking to get into cannabis, I always tell people that is where the adults are because it is cannabis friendly. So that's where you can network with people. Instagram is great, but it's really
showing pictures of how much you're smoking.
Yes.
But
yes.
LinkedIn isn't really like a social media thing, you know, like Instagram is social media. And
LinkedIn was started as a business.
Yeah. It is. It's a business form.
Business networking.
It is a business networking, but in cannabis, it's not. In cannabis, we've kind of taken it over as it's social media, it's educational, it's informative. You know, people put out, that's where I did a lot of my education came from, is someone would post an article or a study or, you know, a paper on cannabis. And I was like absorbing it. And I learned which people to follow because they were putting out relevant information. So
LinkedIn is where we
LinkedIn or higher_high_DiAnA is on Instagram if you want to follow.
Well, we'll put those links in our show notes.
Perfect.
You know, DiAnA, we're coming to the end of this thing, and we always like to find out what your suffering within the cannabis industry has taught you.
Oh boy, it's not to undervalue myself ever again, which I did because I didn't have cannabis experience. And I will say cannabis has been the only industry where I was written up for asking too many questions and I bowed down to misogyny, and I wish I hadn't. So that was my biggest suffering.
I was going to say that's going to be tough. Is it primarily male-dominated field?
Very much so. Very much so. And
So you had to run into that and fight that. Jump that hurdle.
And it's funny because I undervalued myself and I kept myself smaller because I wanted to be in the industry so bad, and I no longer do. And now I have a voice and I very much use it. Yeah.
I think the reason you did that, and I'll go back to it, is your Polish background.
Yeah.
Polish people are the strongest people I've ever met in my life.
We're stubborn as anything.
Ivan Putski, remember Polish Power?
Oh, Polish Power, absolutely.
Polish
Used to
Power.
come up
Yeah.
It is. DiAnA, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
again.
you so much for inviting me.
I really do appreciate all the discussions we have are amazing.
Well,
DiAnA and I talk on the phone, and it's always it's like if Picasso made a painting of a conversation, and that's the conversation between DiAnA and I. It's everywhere.
Yes, it is. It is. But because we're not afraid to touch on any subject.
No,
And that's what I mean. It's enlightening. You
Yes.
know, you're talking to two former cops, telling us how good cannabis could be for you. When
Yep.
we
And
used to
thank
lock
you for
people up
being open to the conversation, because that's part of the taking away the stigma. And
Well, that's the problem with the country now is everybody's set in their own way and they don't want to hear anybody else's
we
opinion.
have to learn how to disagree.
100%, 100%. And the European in me likes those conversations. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing where you're going to go in the future. Because if cannabis is here now, I mean, look at all the other things, the jumping off point. I know one of the foundations we work with, the ASM Foundation, is using microdoses of psilocybin for combating PTS with regrowing synapses. You got ayahuasca, you got ibogaine, you got ketamine shots. All these previously Schedule II narcotics are coming back into play and showing some benefits. So I'm looking forward to where the cannabis industry is going.
Same.
All right. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast. But before we go, we always think about what we learned today. You find a career in the strangest place. Overindulgence is still overindulgence. Education will erase a stigma. Don't undervalue yourself, but most importantly, take the bull by the horns. That's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of Cannabis with DiAnA McElroy. Follow Mike on Instagram at Mike_Failace. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. Of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. And we're going to see you on the next episode of the Suffering Podcast.